Well, hello, and welcome to the Fisher Poetry Podcast, a showcase of prose, poetry, and song written and performed by those in the commercial fishing community. Mostly. I'm your host, Brad. Thanks for joining us today. Today's episode is from the 2024 FisherPoets Gathering in Astoria, Oregon. The location and performers in this episode, as well as links to home pages of both the archive and gathering, are included in the episode description. So, without further ado, here's the show.
Our next performer, I'm excited to welcome up. For the last 20 years, Rich Bard, who lives near Seattle, has been a freelance captain, moving boats along the coast and across various oceans, including the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the South and North Pacific. His longest sail without seeing land was 4,800 miles from Japan to Seattle in 28 days. In his view, however, this occupation is nowhere near as honorable as the prior 25 years he spent salmon fishing in Washington and in Alaska on his steel trawler, the Anna. So Rich is now the author of 3 books, 2 novels, and 1 true, more or less, about salmon fishing and about some offshore calamities. And I also happen to know personally that Rich Bard is one heck of a cribbage player. So come on up, Rich.
To start, I'm going to follow my policy of reading a fable out of this collection called Sayou Blue. Done it for 5 years, and if I read them all, I think I'll get them done by the end of this century. This one's called Big Trip on a Short Railway. Chuck and I were standing next to a Volkswagen engine in Yakutat at Leonard's Landing, thinking. The engine was thinking, wishing it was still in a VW bus, driving around New Mexico, looking for hot springs with a free-spirited couple and a golden retriever, instead of working a job here in rainy Yakutat pulling a rickety boat cradle up and down some improvised rails. The engine's job was to turn a shaft, which turned a belt, which turned a cable winch, which hauled the cradle up the railway to where a boat sitting in it could be worked on. The Anna, my trawler, was currently sitting in the cradle with its new stern bearing. The old bearing, having for years been up to the challenge of keeping the propeller shaft in line, had lost its grip. Without its restraint, the propeller shaft had been clattering around like an anarchist and shouting crazy slogans, "Up the revolution! To the barricades! The apocalypse is near! Cue up the flight of the Valkyries." Anarchy in your boat's propulsion system has its drawbacks. And I'd been glad I could get a new bearing flown to Yakutat pretty quick, and even gladder to find the small railway that Chuck ran, a little ways past the small boat harbor. The next closest place to haul out was 200 miles away in Hoona, and by the time I'd made it that far, the anarchists would have prevailed, redistributing the wealth and seizing the engines of production and maximizing inefficiency. Chuck was thinking about the undersized drum brake he used to slow the cradle when it was going back down toward the water. He'd never hauled a boat as big as the Anna before, and now that he knew she had a tendency toward anarchy, he wanted to make sure things didn't get out of hand. I was thinking about this too, but also about my crew, Brad, who was up in the pilot house getting ready to cook dinner. Brad was an excellent deckhand and a stellar person besides, and we'd become friends. And now I thought it might be kind of fun to not tell him we were going back into the water until the boat started rolling down the rails. "Let's get a line and tie my truck to the cradle, and you can brake as she goes down. That should keep it from getting away," Chuck said. This sounded like a good idea. The truck was a big king cab pickup with traction tires. So we tied a bowline through hook under the front bumper and ran 100 feet of heavy nylon down to the cradle and tied it off, and I got in the truck. Brad's dinner regimen called for tossing a bunch of onion and garlic into a hot-oiled frying pan. The big cloud that attended this procedure made your eyes tear up. This put me off at first until I realized they were tears of joy for how good a piece of fish would taste after it absorbed all that flavor. Now I saw the cloud come out of the wheelhouse door, and some of it drifted in the window I had open so I could hear Chuck. My stomach began to growl like Pavlov's dog, hoping it wouldn't take too long to get the Anna in the water and squared away so we could eat. "Here we go then," yelled Chuck as he eased the winch brake, and my hope for a quick trip came true. The Anna gathered a little speed, and then a lot more, and the brake began to smoke and slip, and the Anna went faster, and the rope to the truck came tight, and I tried braking gently and hard, and neither way worked. And the cradle charged down into the bay, dragging the truck, and went off the end of the railway. And the Anna hit the water with a big splash like a newly christened battleship. Her stern was in Yakutat Bay, and her bow pointed toward the sky as if beseeching heaven. "Mayday, Mayday," she seemed to be saying. On the chance that heaven was occupied with some other business, I jumped out of the truck, which had stopped with its front wheels barely in the water, and waded down the railway and climbed up the cradle onto the boat and loosened the lines, and she slid smoothly off and regained her normal floating position undamaged, except for the skillet, which, in a fit of terror, had leaped off the stove and lost its load of garlic and onion. We started the motor and moved out deeper and got the anchor down. Brad began fixing dinner again, and as he sliced a new onion, I explained how I thought surprising him would be kind of funny. After some pondering, we agreed that even though the joke had gone a little off script, it was still a pretty good one. Not true at all, just like all the other fable. I wrote this next poem a lot of years ago for a friend's memorial service, and I bring it up and do it again every few years because it makes me feel good to think about Matt Pollock, who fished a troller, 50-footer, solid, good old design, and he was a pleasure to be around on the ocean or on shore. So this poem is called For Matt. The fleet's strung out along the 100-fathom curve, shut down and drifting for the night. The boats roll wildly in a choppy, windswept sea, mast lights swaying on the horizon. I gaze out at the lights before I go to sleep. It's comforting to know there's friends out there. Companionship is vital on a world so cold and deep. But now there's one less light on the horizon. And damn, it was a bright one, Matt. You made the radio shine with your raft of trippy stories that you'd tell to pass slow time. Your philosophic attitude was always there at hand for those for whom the struggle sometimes seemed hard to stand. Your ready wit, your curious mind, your conscientious view of what we're doing to our world and what we ought to do. Boy, howdy, Matt, the VHF seems empty without you. I know your spirit's still around and won't fade easily. I know you'll live on in our hearts and minds. And I hope to God you're sailing on some ocean I can't see, but I still miss your light on the horizon. So I was thinking about waves, not so much wind waves, even though they can provide as much drama as you'd ever want when they get strong and muscular and sharp and steep. I was thinking about what they turn into when the wind blows over a really long fetch, which is what we have here in the Pacific. You look out, and there's hundreds, thousands of miles that wind can keep pushing these waves up and consolidating them into a longer, larger wave. And sometimes when it's calm and you're out there and you look around, you wouldn't notice it, but even though the waves, the swells, might be measured in only inches of amplitude and 20 or 30 or more seconds of period, they're still there. And it's my belief that you spend enough days out there in a year and enough years, these swells work their way into your soul. Physically, mentally, soulfully, they become part of you. And when you're on land for a certain amount of time, you start to crave them, being out there again, feeling that rise and settle. So I wrote this sort of a ballad about the swells and also about a couple of friends. All she ever wanted was the feel of salmon's power, flowing up the leader to her hands as she pulled it toward the boat, and the lively motion of the deck beneath her feet, sensuously rolling in the long Pacific swell. All he ever wanted was a lover and a friend, someone to share the work by day, to hold warm and close at night, someone whose dreams were so like his they'd make them all come true, lost in love on a fishing boat in the long Pacific swell. And all they ever wanted, that this life go on and on, each day filled with promise at the coming of the dawn, that the sun and the stars and the living sea would hold them in their spell, carried in the rhythm of the flowing tide and the long Pacific swell. Summer and fall, the years go by, they know they've spent them well, harmonized with the salmon runs and the long Pacific swell. Thank you. See you again next year with another fable.
Well, that's it. This one's in the tote. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is written and produced by Brad Wortman. The theme music for this episode is courtesy of Mark Allen Lovewell and Molly Knoll. If you'd like to appear on or have comments about the show, please send an email to thefisherpoetryarchive@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to haul the latest episodes into your net. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is available via our podcast host, Podbean, as well as Apple, YouTube, and Amazon. You can listen to our other podcast episodes, watch our YouTube videos, and join our community by going to thefisherpoetryarchive.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Come all young sailormen, listen to me. I'll sing you a song of the fish in the sea. Blow, ye winds, westerly, westerly blow. We're bound to the southward, so steady she goes.